Hey guys, Omerko here, self-taught web developer. We just finished the Angular Essentials series, and for you who missed out on that, you have a link down in the description to the whole playlist. We are back now to normal upload, so one video per week. We will continue with this video where we will style our input fields and the labels in such a way that those will hold animation, but also customization for validation of the fields. So for example, here where we do have our name, we will see our label animation, and I could put my name here, like this. Also here for the email, we could see our animation, and if we start typing, we can see the validation as well. But if we use gmail.com, we will see that email will be validated fully. Same goes for our password. Here we can see our placeholder that says that we need to add at least one character. If I do that, we can see validation through our labels. To show you first what we do have with what we will start. Well, here you can see that I do have two files, one is index.html and one for my CSS code. There is no need to know any JavaScript for this tutorial, as we will work only with HTML and CSS. In my HTML file, I have just starter code for HTML5 with title of CSS3 animations, animating labels. I also imported my styles.css, and inside of my body I do have this container section which will wrap my labels and input fields. To move myself now to my CSS file, for my CSS, here I just have the reset for padding and margin on all elements. For you who doesn't know, star sign in CSS will grab all elements from HTML. I am also styling my body with specific background color and specific font family. You can put yours, well, that you prefer. Also, the container section will have fixed width, and the margin will set the whole container in center of my screen. Back now to HTML, and we can start working here. First of all, I will create my div, and I will add a class to my div of input1. I will have three inputs here, so each of those will be called input1, input2, and input3. Also, this input1 is just the wrapper for my input and also a label for that specific input field. So for the input field here, type could be text. I will also put the ID here of name, and also I will put this here to be required. Required attribute here is, well, required. It is important here because we will also handle validation for this input field. I don't know if I mentioned, but stylization for validation will be handled only through CSS. As I mentioned, there won't be any JavaScript here. After my input field, I could have my label here, and for should be for my name, and here should be enter your name. That should be good enough. Also, you can put your label above your input field, it doesn't matter really. Now we have our input one, we could style that and test that, but let's take a quicker way here and create all three input fields that we will have. The next input field will be input 2, then type of the input field won't be text but the email, and ID will be email as well. Required attribute is also required here. For my label here, I will also use email, and enter your email will be the text for my label. And for my third input field, I will set the class to be input3, and type will be a password, name will be a password, and required here is also required, but before it I will also put the placeholder here. Placeholder will say at least one character, like this. So with this placeholder we will give more information to our user that he needs to enter at least one character for this password to work. Also here for will be set to a password, and enter your password will be our text. If you would open up your project inside of your browser, you won't see much. Basically, we'll have just three input fields with labels next to those, and also, well, input fields themselves. Background should be blue or color that you passed, and font family should be specific font family that you passed in your body. If your content is a bit smaller than mine, I just zoomed in a bit so you could see it better. This is normal size of it. I zoomed in to 175% so you could see it better basically. But with that, we are ready to start styling our, well, input fields and our validation. So here, first of all, let's work with our first input field. So I will grab my input 1 section, and for that section I will put position to be a relative, because the label itself will hold the absolute position, so it needs to be relatively positioned to this div. Also, height of this div will be 50 pixel and line height will be 50 pixel, and margin now will be 100 pixel and 0 pixel. So kinda to put it, well, to have at least a bit of spacing between our elements. Now I could style my label, so input 1 and then label element inside. As I mentioned, for that we will use position set to absolute. I will use top to 0 and left to 0, as I wish to move my label to a top side of my input field. Then width of the label will be 100%. It will spread through entirety of this section. We could color our label, for example, put it, well, let's use white color here, FFF. Also now, as our label is 100% long, it will go over our input field. So by clicking on our input field, we won't have that cursor of text. So let's just make sure that we have that cursor of text. And also here, I will put the transition to all is 0.3 seconds. The reason for the transition, well, as I will move my label to a top side, I wish to do that smoothly and not just do it. Now, after my label, I could target my input field. So again, input 1 and input field inside. And here I wish to put my input field to 100% of the whole input 1 section. Then I will put a bit of padding to 8 pixel to top and bottom and 0 pixel to left and right. Also, outline here will be 0 and border will be 0 as well. So I will remove my outline and border for this input field. Then for my border at the bottom, I will add the border only on the bottom side, which will be 2 pixels solid F2, 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 which is a bit grayish white. And background color for my input will be transparent, so my input field won't hold any background color. And color for my text inside of my input field will be, well, white one, so FFF. Now let's handle a bit of validation for our input field. So here, first of all, I will copy my input field and input property, and I will style my invalid state for my input field. So if this input field is invalid, the color of it should be E7 for C3C, which is a red color, and also I will put the same color for my border as well. So border color will be red as well. Also here for my invalid, I could put the outline again to 0, so to not have the outline for my invalid field. So what will this mean? Well, basically my border color should be this grayish white, but if the input field is invalid, for this input field, it's a name input field which is required. So basically if there is no data in input field, then the color and border color will be red. Now let's style valid state for my input field. So here I could use, well, I will also style my focus state and valid state, so those will be the same. So here I will just put the border color of those to be a green color, so we could use like 2ECC71 and this green color should do the work. Now also, if my input field is focused and valid, then I will style my label here. So if this is the case, I will use this sign to style the next element of label, and also here, so label. And by this, if this is the case, I will also change my color of the label to be a green, and I will just move my label here to -25 pixels. So basically, if I focus on my input field, my label should be moved to a top. And if the input field is valid, then my label will change the color as well as border for my input 1. Now let's immediately jump to input 2. Here I will use input 2 class now, like this, and let's style it a bit. So first of all, let's put again position to relative and just margin of 100 pixels, 0 pixels, as we set for our input 1 section. Now I will target again input 2 and the label inside of that section. Again, put your position for label to absolute, and you can move your label to top to a 0 and left again to a 0. And now here we can set the width. We won't set it to 100%, but auto. And also I will set the padding for my label to be 5 pixels, 10 pixels, 5 pixels, and we will change this padding later when we focus our input field, so the label will also change in size. The label itself will hold some border radius. For example, 6 pixels, 0 pixels, 0 pixels, and 6 pixels again. So it doesn't look just well with those sharp corners. Now color for my label will be FFF, FFF, and here I could put a background color. So background color won't be transparent here, but let's put a bit gray background like BDC 3C7, that should do the work. Also cursor should be again text. And the last thing, again, put your transition to all is 0.3 seconds, so we could have a bit of transition. Now after our label, again we will style our input field inside of the input 2 section. So input field should hold a width of 100%. Then padding could be 8 pixels on all sides. And here again remove your outline, so outline set to 0, and also border set to 0. And now, as I won't have any border, I will still hold border radius a bit of 6 pixels as I did for my label. And also here background color could be ECF0F1. And also last thing is box shadow should be set to a none, because by default the input field will have a bit of shadow on it. Now to style the invalid state of this input field, so invalid, here this should change to color of red, which we already used, and outline again should be 0. There is no need to change border color for this input field, as we won't have any border, we removed it fully here. Also now let's style our focused and valid states, so here valid, and as well focus state. So for our input field, if that is the case, I will put the border color, where it is, here it is, to this green border. One thing that I will also do, if my input field is invalid here, then I wish also to style my label here. Or if my input field is focused, let's do it like that. So if the input field is focused, so focus and also invalid. So if this is the case, then my label should hold specific stylization, which will be the background color of our red color here. And the last thing, if our input field is focused and valid, well, not and but or valid, then here we can use label again. We will style our label and we will just change background color to our green, because that's the valid color. Border radius should now be 6 pixels on all sides. Padding, as I mentioned, we will change it to 2 pixels, 5 pixels, 2 pixels. And we will move our label to top by minus 30 pixels. Now for our third input field, I will copy over the input 2, basically everything that we styled inside of our input 2 section. And here I will just change these classes of input 2 to input 3. So 3 should do the work. Let's copy over this quickly. Okay. And the only thing that it will change here, well, I could remove this border radius and padding. The only thing that should change here is minus 160 pixels, for example. Well, let's use 63 and not to a top side, but to a left side now. And that should be good. So one last thing that I just saw is this transition is set to all is 0.3. Let's use S at the end, so for seconds. And also here as well, let's check input 1. Okay, that should be correct. So now we could test this quickly. So first of all, let's test our first input field. Here we do have our animation, the color is changed. If I would add my name here, everything should be correct. Now let's use the email. So here it is, test@mail. Obviously it is valid, again invalid.com. everything is valid, that's great. And for our password, enter your password. If you would click on it, it should be moved to the left side, and here we could see our at least one character, add one character. There it is, validation is fully mimicked on our input fields. So this will be all for this video, guys. Thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw, please click like and subscribe, as I am posting new content weekly. Thank you once again, and I will see you in my next video. Bye bye.